Hello, and welcome to Mayday Roleplay. Thank you for joining us as we come together to tell stories of ghosts, beloved characters created by their storytellers who have met their final chapters. We here come to bear witness to last impressions and learn to say goodbye. This is the game known as Ghost-Fi. But before we turn our next pages, some housekeeping is in order. We'd like to thank our handler-level Patreon contributors. Their involvement here allows us to continue at Mayday to produce and tell stories for your viewing pleasure. So thank you to Advance War Sammy, OG Pan, Bimblewart, Cameron S., Kirby's Double, Moria, Brandon C., Jonathan M., and Ren. If you too would like to contribute to Mayday, be sure to find us on Patreon. You'll get access to early releases, art, bi-monthly games run by Mayday, and our Discord server built around our wonderful community there. And expect VOD exclusive runs of Ghost-Fi by the Mayday members and a campaign diary in the near future. If you haven't heard, we have completed our third season of our Delta Green series, Doomed to Repeat, which is now available along with our extensive catalog of completed seasons and shows on our YouTube for VODs and anywhere you get your podcasts for audio-friendly versions. Be sure to join us bi-weekly on live stream for our Vampire the Masquerade campaign, Vegas by Night. And as always, follow us on all major social media platforms or our website for updates on future content and other news. We would like to also thank the wonderful guests who have come to tell stories with us. Top-tier creatives in the actual play and TTRPG scene, gifted storytellers, and their beloved characters. So be sure to follow their amazing work and all the wonderful things that they do in the description listed. Ghost-Fi is a game about death and grief and the complicated lives of complex characters. This actual play is intended for mature audiences, so please take care of yourself and be aware. Our players are under the guidance of safety tools, and X-Card can be employed at any time. And with that, let's begin. Amazing. Let's introduce our cast today.
Hey, I'm Rahrah, he, him. No, he, they. That was a mistake. I'll be playing Frolic, he, him. And I'm he, they. Frolic is a he, him.
Wonderful. And my name is Eli. I will be your guide today. You know, sometimes acts of selflessness render consequences that we're not always prepared for. In the end, what we do for others is can be marked in a way that leaves maybe some things we're not prepared for in our day-to-day. And for Frolic, as these final moments of being alive fade away, and all the sights and sounds and sensations that we come to know and be familiar with, dissipate into a sense of nothingness. But we always know that something can come out of nothing. And as a sense returns to Frolic, as the darkness becomes a form of light again, we enter what is known as the manifestation, a construct that's built, a place that maybe has left a impression on the soul, something that can't be left behind, but we find comfort in when we embrace the darkness of eternity. So what is this manifestation look like for Frolic? What gets constructed out of the nothing?
The first thing would be the sound of flowing water of a creek in Montana in the early 1980s, where he grew up. He was placed there after his time in a home for a while to work the farm that the family kept and everything. He himself being lost from the Fey realm as an infant in Utah, Montana region. There was a spot about 20 minutes from home where there was a bend in the river. He built a tree house there over years and years and years and years. And it was his haven, his castle, where he'd go read King Arthur books as a child and decide to be a knight one day, because that's what you do if you're brave and if you're true. So I think you'd see that form piece by piece, almost as though somebody blew off a pile of charcoal and the image was left. Only the creek moving and being alive first before everything. The birds, it's dusk. You can tell it's summer because the heat's finally ending and there's that cool evening that's even better for having waited for it all day. And for now, the treehouse is still there in the tree, though he knows the last time he saw it, it was in a pile.
What does Frolic look like in these moments as their image kind of fills into this beautiful location in Montana? What are they like?
You would see him looking around 22 in this moment, though when he passed, he was 38. You see a Kender, very short, about 3 feet tall, tan brown skin with mist-colored eyes and kind of flashes of tie-dye in his hair, his long kind of locks that are almost twisting on their own. He's not trying to make any fashion statements, he's just dirty. And he has a little bandana and glasses taped together, a fanny pack, some shoes with no socks meant to be easily kicked off so you can swim or feel the soil between your toes. Clothing, the easiest description would be it looks like he pulled it from a variety of clothing lines. So it's maybe a woman's blouse, but tight up on a little Kender, it looks pretty sharp. And he's just looks like he maybe got dressed out of a bin in the dark. But on his belt, you see many little pouches all around, like those little velvet Ren Fair pouches. There's nothing of overimportance of him, but if he comes to form, the first thing he would do is tap all those to make sure he has all the things he's collected.
Wonderful. You know, the end of summer brings that level of dryness that kind of can be seen in the yellowing of grass, and even the breeze kind of kicks up the dirt and anything that is loose enough to be carried on the wind. And a place as peaceful as of Frolic's manifestation. You realize that if, you know, all the people who would potentially occupy this space around this like farm area, this beautiful little region, Frolic notices that there's nobody here. There's no active presence of life that would have come from this space, and it doesn't. Such emptiness in the vastness can almost feel a bit lonely and unfamiliar. But as Frolic is walking about this place, maybe alongside the creek or near the tree house, there's a moment where there is a sensation of connection, that somebody has found their way here, and that someone who might be able to share in this journey, to bear witness to the next steps along the way. And this person or thing is your guide. And to Frolic, what does this guide look like to them?
It's familiar because it looks like Frolic, but it looks like a very small, about 8-inch version of Frolic, which was the first thing he learned how to do with Mage Hand. So when he was alone or lonely or was tired of being the smallest one in the world, he would make a little Frolic who was company and brave and helped him in many an adventure. Never spoke or anything, but lonely solitude and quiet is a place where Frolic grew. That is a place that he feels a little more at home in than when he was in like the heart of Salt Lake City. That made him want to hide under overpasses and kind of go back to wherever there was trees and things of that sort. So the quiet wouldn't throw him off as much as maybe he had grown not to expect it to be so quiet by the end of his life. But seeing wee little purple and gold kind of glittered Frolic maybe pull himself up on a rock, brave as all hell, that would probably at least put him at peace. Well, I might be alone, but at least I'm familiar in my loneliness.
Yeah. And that visage of a small Frolic, all glint in purple and gold, rests on that stone, looking at you. And you know that at least here you're not quite as alone as you think, and you're bestowed with the familiar comforts that you have made for yourself. And with that, let's look to pull our first card.
I already shuffled them. Should I shuffle them again?
No, if you've shuffled them, then you are good to go.
We have a King of Diamonds.
King of Diamonds. Wonderful. So diamonds represent locations. And the King of Diamonds is an area along or on a road. So what does that look like for Frolic?
As he's here looking at the creek, where he wouldn't even say where he started, where he was stuck until he was able to begin. All of a sudden he remembers other parts of his life, and he remembers the road leading to the ferry going to Antelope Island on the outside of Salt Lake City, where the first party he was a part of had a large battle, the large battle of their experience together against a manifesting fire version of Joseph Smith that wanted to wipe out the fey water creatures that had been living on Antelope Island for a period of time. In that final battle, Frolic, quote unquote, rolled 3 crits in a row. And he had never felt so much like those knights he read about. He had never felt so brave or prepared for something. The entire party wanted to leave and get everyone safely to this other realm. And Frolic, with how he rolled, convinced them all to stay and fight, knowing that they maybe would all get wiped out in this situation. And he remembers that road where all of his life finally mattered for a moment, and he did the right thing and the stars aligned and he saved the day. And he wonders how many of those 16 years after that was him trying to find roads like that one, and how none of them ever will be as important to him as that dirty ass little side of a driveway that led up to that ferry.
Wonderful. Roll me a d4.
That is a 4.
A 4. Wonderful. A 4 is a absolute success. So your actions is successful. And if you were to have had spite, you would be able to remove it. But since we have not yet reached that point in which spite has occurred, a success is all we get. So what does that look like for Frolic to acknowledge a road that led to an opportunity to be maybe something more than themselves? And how does one define success here in letting such a moment go?
he's torn because he remembers them, I don't know, not saving the world, but saving the valley or saving a group, a community. But then it's juxtaposed of him looking at this treehouse where the only early friend he ever made, he failed and they got hurt here. And he knows one road led to heroicness and being brave and true, but the other road could have led to a happiness that might have been more humble, but just as satisfying. And he wonders how much of his fate was because of mistakes that he had to run from, and how much of it was him actually seeking out like a story. So he's probably just wondering how differently it would have gone if he had stayed here, but also if he hadn't have made the mistakes that made him leave home.
The thing about roads is that, as you mentioned, they can lead to different places, and we have to make choices and ultimately come to terms with them, no matter where those roads lead us and where those roads end. And while this particular road led to a success, despite the odds, and despite knowing that any road could lead to bad times, to hard times, to the times in between, we are always able to find gratitude a bit in knowing that at least one road taken could make such a difference and such an impact in multiple people's lives and even in ourselves. And with that, we're able to come to terms with the many roads we take in our overall journey through life. And we return kind of back to that creek with the vestige of this mage hand looking Frolic, all purple and gold. And as you look upon that that reflection essentially of Frolic, you come to realize that this image possesses a level of understanding beyond comprehension, a level of empathy and openness that maybe you've never noticed before, or it seemingly possesses as it looks on. And even despite that, you're still able to know that right now in this very moment that you are not alone, that someone is bearing witness to these moments. And with that, let us pull our next card.
7 of Clovers.
7 of Cloves.
What a great game. Who made this?
So clubs are things of the self, a personal infliction. And while 7 is a power card, which one can wager spite, we have yet to acclimate spite. So there's nothing to bet on here, and we will take it as is. But the 7 of clubs is a time when you went against a personal stance.
I remember it was after we had defeated the Sphinx living in the water tower downtown, and their kind of mafia of cat people could be an accurate way to put it. Frolic had caught one spying on himself and the party at this house they were living at for a while that had a pond and a barn, and the whole party could be there in peace type of deal. The rest of the party never saw him do this, but as they all went to bed, he drowned the one who saw them all in the pond, realizing it was better to kill this one than put the whole party at risk again, because Frolic was tired of losing. They had had a very rough couple of days before then. So very calmly, he held this creature unarmed underwater until it stopped moving. The worst part was that pond was also the first place Frolic ever flew. And he remembered flying with the ducks there and the geese once he unlocked the ability to do so. And his first scene revealing that he had learned that ability. So it had also represented a freedom away from the creek in Montana and all those ghosts. And the fact that it had only existed in that innocence for a few days before he was hiding bodies at the bottom of the pond was a crossroads in his decision to basically become more of a warlock or steer into more noble kind of paths. Because he wanted to be a knight, but it didn't seem to him that the world had a place for that anymore, and that everyone's hands were dirty. And if you made the honorable decision, you would lose the people you loved. So he went through a lot of those hard decisions in that place, just watching the ducks fly over the surface of the water where he buried a innocently murdered cat person.
Roll me a d4.
Oh no. 2.
2. So 2 is a partial failure. Your actions fail, but nothing gets worse. So we'll look at the first part of this first, which is defining what that failure kind of looks like. When maybe doing an act of what seems like selflessness for the sake of others and making a hard decision and following through with it. What about this is failure to Frolic? How do they define how this tether continues to connect them?
I think it's the realization that all of his ideals were almost just that. They were more idealizations of a world he had yet to experience. And he's like, if I just go out there with my truck, Shadowfax, and see the world and try to help my friend, surely through my goodness and my sheer hope for better, I will find a way. Like, that's how magic works, right? Doors open to those that are pure of heart, and aid is given to those who call out with an innocent voice. And it didn't take long before he realized that's not how the world worked. And all he ever wanted to be was brave and true and pure, especially compared to his foster siblings who were mean and much larger than him. And that's where he learned to kind of fight a little bit and things like that. And it was the first time he realized that to be a hero, he couldn't be true. And to be a hero, he couldn't maintain honor. And it was probably a big part of him grew up at that moment, but a big part of his light also dimmed and sunk into that realization of going forward.
Awesome. Let's roll an additional d4 to see what comes next.
That's a 1, so that's probably even better.
For a 1, you will add a point towards your failed progress, but you will not grow spite here.
I don't think he can forgive himself, is his issue with that. It's hindsight's easy, but he thought he was pure-hearted enough that it would have lasted longer than a few weeks.
There's a point where at any point in our lives where maybe we go to aspire to be something more than ourselves, and to aspire to be a knight in a way is to embody an image of doing good for the sake of good, and to make those kinds of decisions, and to try to do right by those around us. But maybe in the act of growing up or the act of finding realization and truth, we understand that the world is a very complicated and messy place. And even the intentions to do good can render evil results. And it changes us in ways that we maybe are not prepared for or even expect. And it might end up dimming a bit of light in ourselves when we pursue such dreams for a better future. And it's something that we can't maybe let go even. And while it doesn't bring anger or resentment or anything like that, it's still an act that cannot be shaken from. And even when we try to look back at some of the good times, we're also remembering the things that are less savory. And even though a little pool where one can fly to great heights, we're reminded of what still lurks at the bottom of that pool if one is willing to confront it and dive in and see what it is in actuality.
And it can be a confusing anger because it starts as anger at self. Mm-hmm. And then I think with some time, you really realize it's an anger at a world that required you to become that. When you could have been gentle if they had just left you in the garden. And I think it was just a confusing time for him to grow into friendship, lack of friendship, being a hero, failing at being a hero. He maybe figured that out later, but he didn't figure that out when it happened.
And as you kind of pull out of that bottom of that pool and return back to the familiarity of your manifestation and look all around you, you're still with your reflection of yourself, the small little purple and gold glinted Frolic who still sits on that rock. And as you look upon them, they still possess that level of understanding beyond comprehension, a level of openness and empathy that a constructed form of magic seems to impossibly have, but it's there and it's with you. And it shares this journey that you are experiencing. And with that, let us go ahead and pull our final card.
Oh. From the top. 4 of diamonds.
4 of diamonds. Awesome. Back to our locations. The 4 of diamonds is also a power card, which means that you are able to pull an additional card here. And we will add it to, we'll add both prompts together to see what makes of this. So please pull me another card.
Queen of Clubs.
The Queen of Clubs. Awesome. So we'll start with our diamonds. Diamonds, again, are locations. And our diamond of 4 of diamonds is a place near the ocean or out at sea. And the Queen of Clubs, again, the clubs represent personal afflictions of the self. The Queen of Clubs is a grief you couldn't overcome. So let's talk about that.
Is it all right to choose which one to begin the narrative from, the Queen or the Diamond?
Absolutely.
I think at that he would give his little self a little knuck bump, and then offer to put him up on his shoulder, little purple and gold sitting on him, and then maybe walk closer to the treehouse. I think Frolic was very intentionally trying to not look at it, not think too much about it, but just take in the space versus getting specific. And if his vision blurred and they had the montage, you would see a younger Frolic, not much shorter, but definitely younger, running along this space next to a ginger girl with bright blue eyes, both of them barefoot and yelling and having a great time. And that was Fianna, who was his first friend once her family moved to the valley. And she was the only one that knew Frolic had abilities when they started manifesting. He himself was a Fae-touched individual, so the earliest form of power he manifested was blinking into a different space. And it just happened suddenly. It happened when he was afraid, but she and him decided to practice it and figure out what that was and figure out what all this is, and magic exists. Isn't this exciting to do together? And one day they were in the treehouse and his magic backfired and the whole thing collapsed, and his misty step saved him instinctually, and she was in a coma. So his entire quest was to find someone who could bring her out of this, and then later realize she was his patron and the voice in his head. That was always with him even when he was alone. So the treehouse represents his freedom and also the consequences of who he was. And I think it's a part he's never really gotten over. It's a thing he's probably not had the maturity or guidance to think about in the right way, being just a lonely kid who later was pretty good at fighting. He didn't have any sort of mentorship to teach him, like, this is what your heart's trying to tell you when you feel like this. So the treehouse is not yet a scar, probably still a wound. But I think at this point he realizes that something has changed or something is over, and he wants to get a close look before. So he probably wouldn't go into it not trusting it to hold him up or anything, but just walk on the outside, almost like kids going under door jams where you touch all the logs and you run your hands across it, maybe put little Frolic up and let him jump through and see their names carved with like such sincerity all over the inside of it, back when their dreams were still pure enough that they thought they could leave this place together. So I think he just walks laps around that until maybe that thought of the sea comes. During his main adventuring days, his shield was a mailbox that he accidentally put his arm through early on and just decided it was real easy to hold up for his little body, and it fit. After they subdued Joseph Smith and the party basically broke up, they all had families and causes and jobs. Frolic didn't have those things. He was just waiting for his violence to be needed for most of his life. So he did go west, and in Big Sur, he found an old piece of gnarled driftwood that he turned into a different shield, and had little pictures drawn in of him and his original party, like on the ferry fighting this massive fire creature all together. Buscemi, the cleric that had been a LDS missionary before converting to the god of water, the drunk monk from the bar, the young girl that ended up being a vampire, not just a himbo. They were the closest friends he ever had, and they all moved on with their lives the second they saved the world. Frolic's life was a little lonely and a little quiet and a little wishing someone would point him towards the right thing so he could do it. So he always remembered them fondly. They probably had kids and all sorts of accomplishments as life went on, and he was still carving their silhouettes into shields just in case the world needed him to inflict or feel pain one more time. He never really left the party, even though the whole party did.
Roll me a d4.
Okay. That's 3.
3. A 3 is a partial success, which means that your actions are successful here, but a complication is introduced. So what is that like when one acclimates a wound that spurns a form of purpose? How does one heal from that, or how does one move on from such a blow?
I think in the most pessimistic way he can still be hopeful. He just accepts that that's what he's here for. And he remembers at the very end in Vegas in 1999, before all the quarantines started locking down that whole region and mutations began forming. And there was this massive demon devil creature on the loose. And when he told that whole subway of people to run, he'll hold him off, he meant it. He was ready finally for the world to require violence of hand, not just violence of heart. So in those moments, and I think now you see younger Frolic in this manifestation remembering reach up, and he has almost a dent out of his temple that looks like the inside of a pomegranate, shining and like sparkling in the light, and even pulls off like a single seed and eats it, remembering facing down that massive creature all alone and finally feeling like he was the right tool for the right problem. He was a hero again that day, but he didn't live to see the fact that he was. So his whole life was him hoping to be a part of something brighter than just him by himself. And most of his life was him by himself. But that doesn't mean that wisdom wasn't gleaned. That doesn't mean that the stories weren't true and the victories weren't important. So it's a quiet moment of self-acceptance, I think, on his end. Knowing that all those books he used to read, usually the heroes were alone. And that's what made them heroes, is they still did the right thing. So I think he maybe won't forgive himself, but he will forgive the world a little bit. But there's a deeper anger in him where to him, at least, he didn't betray his faith, but he feels like his faith was betrayed. And if that's a small consolation, he's still happy to have it at the end.
Awesome. Roll me that additional D4.
Okay, let's do a purple one. Okay, that's another 4.
Another 4. So with that is a success. So we will only add 1 point to your progress, but we will not incur spite here.
I'm happy he doesn't have any spite yet. Frolic had a lot of spite.
Sometimes wounds are just so difficult to heal, and sometimes they can fester long into our years as time progresses. Sometimes we find ourselves reopening those wounds over and over again, and wounds have the capacity to give us purpose, to give us direction, to seek out and follow a level of faith in ourselves, to reach towards heights or towards expectations that we build for ourselves, especially for heroes who walk relatively lonely paths. And despite others around you finding the capacity to move on beyond the purpose that we define for ourselves, maybe it's the knowledge of holding fast until we see all of this through that gives us a level of peace and acceptance, or at the very least the acceptance that despite it all, we can make something out of heartache and tragedy, and can be a defining final moment for us when we make the active choice to live in our truths and our purpose and see it to the end, even if we don't get to bask in the shade of its results, and that we accept the end when it comes for us. And as we return back to our manifestation, as we return back to standing underneath that treehouse as little Frolic climbs down those rungs and stands before you at their feet. Once again, you are met with a level of understanding beyond recognition, a level of openness and empathy, and the eyes of somebody who is here with you, sharing this journey. And I think at that point, this is the first time where little Frolic, instead of you holding a hand out for them, they reach a hand out for you to take. And they begin to kind of lead you somewhere deeper, maybe into the deeper down the creek, a ways away from this little farm in Montana. And where we're heading is what's known as the crossing. And the crossing represents a location that diverts into different directions. This could be such things as an airport or a bus station, stairwells, forks in the road. It could be even such portals of some kind, like a door or a gate or an entrance. It's just a place in which one has to stand at this precipice and make a definitive decision on where we go and what we find next. So what does that look like for Frolic? What is this place in which diverts into all directions?
I think it's fairly bare, like a lot of crossroads in Montana are, where there's maybe a street sign with the arrows, but you can't see what they're referring to because everything's so far apart. Especially when you're 3 feet tall, everything feels just so far apart. And it's the same decision he's had to make a few times in his life, imagining what was at the end of all of these roads and having to take that first leap of faith, hoping that what he imagined was right. 1983, he couldn't look up what anywhere he was going was like. He was just driving around in Shadowfax, like hoping to find somewhere with the right light and the right amount of swimmable water and the right amount of friends, and he just knew what the creek didn't have. And he knew what he wanted to find. So I think regardless of where any of the roads point to, I think he makes almost a conscious choice to consider this adventure, this life, this beautiful and terrible life he's had, a little bit of a wash. But in a happy way, and like, well, I'm still here right now, so can I try again? Like, can I become just as pure and naive again and see if maybe the next time I can pass through while maintaining that and while keeping that? I wasn't able to save my friend, but sometimes we need saving our whole lives. So I think he's starting to have these types of thoughts of maybe not I can do it better, but I can do it again. If there is something next, he's hoping that it's playful. He's hoping that he doesn't have to pull that antler short sword out of his body every time he wants it because it always hurts. He's hoping maybe his ability to jump around and flash travel could be useful for pulling cats out of trees and not having to inflict pain on enemy or friend alike. So I think he's going to spin around in the middle of that crossroad with his eyes closed and just think about who he always wanted to be. If other things hadn't happened to him. And then he's just going to stop, point on his nose, and walk directly in whatever direction is ahead of him with his little Frolic next to him. You can follow me. I've been lost here before. Is a little bit of the air around Frolic, maybe even a little skip in his step, because he always loved the beginning of books.
With that reflection, is this a definitive answer to hold on here in this moment? Or is this an act of letting go in hopes that the next chapter might be something for you?
He's definitely, Frolic's a little mischievous. So if he can do this, he would love to let go of this world and hold on to himself just a little bit, because there were parts of him he never let shine the way he wished they could. Like all of us, hopefully, there's parts of ourselves we adore, and it's a sincere adoration. And he never got to do that. So there's parts of him he's hiding from the light of God, from the light of eternity. Like, he's hiding those for himself. Oh, great game.
So as we reach our epilogue here, as Frolic has made a decision to move on in a way beyond this place between the living and the dead, or the beyond even, what is our final reflection here? How do we bring this story to an end? And most importantly, how does Frolic say goodbye in the way that he knows best?
I think it would be probably a twofold, like, cinematic image of him just walking down one of these barren streets. But Frolic always really loved to play, and Frolic is incredibly fast. So the way he would play at night when no one was watching to try to practice, to keep himself safe, keep other people safe, would just be to dead sprint through the woods and just misty stepping around, throwing daggers that he catches, backflipping, and just laughing the whole way. He knew he wouldn't be strong. He knew he was never going to be strong, but he knew he could be fast. And I think as him and Little Frolic are walking down this road, you also see a transparent image over them of Frolic and Little Frolic, like running through winding, like eucalyptus-y type branches, with a young redhead around Frolic's age behind them, also running just as quickly. And all you hear is laughter.
There's a moment in which you reach out your hand to this little Frolic, and there's just a brief interruption in the visage where standing right behind them is a figure that stands there shrouded in a cloak where you can't quite see what their face looks like. And the only thing you kind of can make out is if you were to look down towards their hands, and you can just see just the tips of what should be fingers, but are just the tips of bone on a hand. But that image kind of gets reconstructed back into the purple and golden light of Little Frolic as they take on your hand, and you guys together walk down a path that is yours of the making, that despite all the things that are being left behind here, that how you get to move forward is defined by the hope that you're going to make for yourself with the knowledge that you acquired here. And you are being followed out by the fleeting joy of a younger self who had a friend who got to explore and play and do all the things that make life worthwhile and worth enjoying. And as you kind of continue down that path until you become specks on the horizon, that shrouded figure kind of returns back to that crossroad, bearing witness to a lonely soul who has found comfort in things, and has decided to take this next step, not alone, and held together by moments of joy and love. And they kind of look back to that the manifestation of that farm on Montana, and to see those two souls just enjoying life and just taking it in for a moment, to bask in the beautifulness of such a spirit. But eventually you fade off into the horizon. And as you do, all the rest of it starts to fall into place, as like taking a deep breath and exhaling the world starts to fall back into its usual design as the darkness starts to take over, and the crossroads fades away, and the creek fades away, and the treehouse too. All of it returns back to the nothing. But something was there, and it was, and it's just the last gentle ringing of laughter that calls out into the nothing to acknowledge that something was here, and something was present, and something was loved despite it all. And as those final laughter just kind of fades away, that is where we'll end the story of Frolic.
Cool.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Wonderful game.
Thank you so much. Let's reintroduce our cast while we're here at it. Rahrah, tell us about all the amazing things that you do, where we can find you, and all of those good stuff in between.
Hey, I'm Rahrah. I love playing lighthearted games with friends. I run the Heart is a Dungeon podcast. We're a TTRPG sad sack adventure for heroes and poets. We're winding down our second series. It'll be done around the beginning of December. Uh, I'm sorry, I'm still emotionally processing Frolic. But it's great over there. It's a lot of soundscape. I don't know. Go take a listen. I don't know. I'm sad.
Wonderful. Guys, thank you so much for coming in and joining us today. If Ghostfi is something that you have enjoyed seeing being played, I encourage you to bring it to your table and to see what your players or yourself as a writer might be able to find in this. This was a game that I wrote in 2022 with hopes to bring a level of peace and catharsis to people who make wonderful characters who may not have an opportunity to put these characters to rest, to find peace for them. And it's just a great way to find new folds and new cool things to know about your character.
Highly recommend.
Hell yeah! So follow the link down in the descriptions and see where it takes you. But thank you again. Be sure to come back. There are more ghosts to tell more stories. We have a wonderful set of cast of guests that are here to bring their characters to the table, as well as the variety of our Mayday crew who are doing the same. So there will be more in store and more ghosts to tell stories with. So until then, we'll see you next time, and I hope you are well.
Thanks, everyone.